Therapists of Reddit. What was your biggest, I know I'm not supposed to judge you but holy crap moment? I work with youth and adolescents who have anxiety, trauma, and/or depression. Some of the kids I worked with had some pretty severe attachment issues. Regardless of this, I never thought I'd have to seriously explain. You can't just buy a straitjacket for your kid. Feeding your kid ultra-spicy ramen each night instead of the meal everyone else is eating isn't specifically defined as mistreatment, but you have to understand the emotional mistreatment that this causes. Your kid isn't trying to kill you because they stand in your doorway at night crying. That's likely because they're scared of their traumatic nightmares, but feel like you will just yell at them if they wake you up. As a therapist, I think that it is important to have healthy communication between parents and kids. Here's my number one tip. Don't let someone else tell you how you feel. Think. If someone says, "You're angry with me," or something to that effect, ask yourself if you really are. If you're not actually angry, then don't spend a second more on it. A lot of kids, family members get hung up on trying to justify their own actions according to someone else's perception. Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week she canceled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an orgy, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone. Clinical psychologist working primarily in forensics here. This means my clients are usually involved in legal proceedings. Family court, juvenile court, criminal court, etc. My job is usually to evaluate or provide treatment. I am not there to judge. That's the judge's job. But of course I have my thoughts. I am usually impressed by the justifications people make for crappy behavior. The one that irks me the most is when parents manipulate their child against the other parent. I've had to do therapy for a 5-yo who said she doesn't want to see a parent because they haven't paid child support. Excuse me? What 5-yo knows, understand, or needs to be worried about child support? My professor once shared what a patient said that made her quit her job. I didn't R-word my daughter. She liked it. The daughter was 6. She couldn't take it anymore. She worked in a rehabilitation center for people who have been sentenced for serious crimes and were forced to get mental help. Really difficult job, and this pushed her over the edge. Therapist here. I don't think I've ever judged clients. My job is to understand them and their experiences and help them make the improvements they are ready to make. But I have very directly made my thoughts clear about choices, especially choices parents make about their kids. This probably comes off as judgment depending on the client's insecurity about the topic. One example was telling parents of a child I was working with a severe mood disorder that had made both very depressed and made homicidal threats and attempts, that it did not seem like a good idea to buy the young kid a weapon, especially the week after the mother spent the session sharing her fears that the child would murder her. I was counseling a 13-year-old girl for anxiety and she reported sexual mistreated from her stepdad. I called her mom and told her mother I needed to call Child Protective Services. Turns out that CPS was already aware and the mistreatment was first reported around the patient's age 7. Mom was aware of the mistreatment and stayed with her husband anyway. It was a complicated situation, and it wasn't. How could she not do more to protect her daughter? Sorry lady, I'm judging. A woman who deliberately kept getting pregnant because she enjoyed the attention, and then would immediately afterwards dump her kids with the foster system or in one case a willing relative. She had 6 kids at the time I met her. Here's a bad story I've had with a therapist. I was assigned to see the lead psychologist of the local hospital as I was severely depressed and have thought about ending my life. She literally rolled her eyes at me, told me to grow up, and said she could be having appointments with people who were actually about to hurt themselves, not me who was already working with the teen. This sent me absolutely spinning, bottling everything up, thinking I didn't deserve help, and ended up in hospital 2 years later after an attempt. When they looked at my records, the hospital suddenly became very interested in any psychological experts I'd previously spoken to, informed them of the above incident. They asked if I knew the name and I said I didn't, but they had a strong accent. They immediately looked like they were about to burst out crying, apologized excessively, then informed me they had been fired a year ago. No idea how many people were affected by that therapist. It's not often I get to talk about my profession, but here goes. I was working at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center and had a client come in who was a self-proclaimed drug lord. As we worked together, he told me about his history. Included in this history was how he got to where he was currently at. During the conversation, this man admitted to selling his sister into slavery, forcibly injecting her with several sedatives and narcotics, and having several people teach her a lesson. What this meant, he never shared. He told this story with a blank face, smiling only when he recalled the good times, which he referred to as times when he had enough heroin to get through the day. I'm not sure where he is at now, but this man inspired me to work with victims of sex trafficking, because not only do they deal with the stigma of selling their bodies, they often manage addictions. People would honestly be floored if they realized how many people were addicted to chemicals that they were forcibly given. lots of people discussing child touchers as an example of the toughest stuff to not judge despite our training. I haven't yet treated a child toucher, thankfully, at least not an identified one. I did run a men's anger management group though, and some of those men had done some terrible things to women. Most of them I found ways to like and admire for their positive aspects. But there were two guys in that group I just could never find unconditional positive regard for. One guy basically never spoke in group. He would give one-word answers and occasionally just discuss how unfair the system was to him. I worked really hard to open him up and find things to connect over, but he never opened up to me or the group. He left the group after he strangled his girlfriend and went to jail. She survived, thankfully. The other left group early routinely, showed up late, participated minimally, and similarly never wanted to open up honestly. He left early one group after we had discussed him staying to the end and threatened me when I told him he wasn't going to get credit for attendance, something the court required. Oddly, I eventually moved into the apartment below him, completely without knowledge, and listened to him scream at his girlfriend and break shish asterisk asterisk while I called the cops. I judge these men. They're crappy. Maybe they're redeemable, but redemption requires self-exploration and they both refused to do so. It's worth noting how differently I felt about them than so many others in the group. Men I found ways to help and admire and respect even in spite of their awful behavior in the past. When you as a therapist get to that point, it's time to start thinking of referrals. Be genuine with your client, and then refer out. You have to have unconditional positive regard or you'll never achieve therapeutic rapport. I think for me, the one that comes to mind is a frequent caller to the self-harm hotlines. He'd call in and say he's not providing his phone number or name. He would just say that you had 10 seconds to convince him not to end himself over the phone, or he'd blow his brains out and it'd be your fault. Then he'd count down from 10 to 1 while you're on the phone talking. At 1, he'd hang up. I'm sure the whole point was to make me feel bad or prove some point. I don't know. I have insufficient information to make an assessment with just that. But I have to admit, when I was trying to sleep on days he'd call, especially the first time, I was thinking, effing asshole better not be dead, effer. I do acute pediatric inpatient behavioral therapy. Has never happened with a child, and never will. Parents on the other hand can be real pieces of shish asterisk asterisk, and the way they mistreat their children, then throw them off on us and scream, fix them. I'm a big burly guy and I've cried many nights over this. I work at a residential group home. We had a kid who we had admitted about 4 months prior, when in a family session they mentioned they had parasites. I'm like, what? Mom goes, oh yeah, our whole family has them. We don't believe in getting rid of them since they're part of our biological ecosystem. And I'm just dumbstruck. We spent 3 weeks afterwards convincing this family it was an infectious disease concerns as other residents have fecal eating behaviors and various other unsanitary issues that could cause a unit spread. 3 weeks of education, planning, and worst of all convincing this kid and mother that their IQ wouldn't drop because they had agreed to irradiate the parasites. Lots of CBT work, but Jesus, it took way longer than any of my team expected. Once had a patient whose wife shook their baby to death. He wanted help reconnecting with his wife. At the time I was a young father of a newborn myself, and he triggered a lot of fear in me for my own child, a deep loathing of his spouse, and pity, the how pathetic kind, for the patient. I tried for 3 sessions, met his spouse and everything before handing the case over to my supervisor, who knew about my initial reactions, and tried to help me through it. Unfortunately, it ended up being more about my feelings than his, and I was new to the profession at the time. These things are expected to crop up from time to time, but I was still taken aback by my own reactions. I work with kiddos who have experienced some kind of mistreatment, trauma. 90% of my clients have been sexually mistreated. I have a lot of holy shish asterisk asterisk moments, but not from judgment of my clients but from what happened to them. I've had clients whose father made them help him dismember mom's body after dad murdered her in front of them. I've had clients under the age of 8 who have been sex trafficked. I've had clients who have been forced to film torture videos. I have holy shish asterisk asterisk moments all the time. I feel like a lot of the comments saying that they never judge their clients might be working in voluntary services or they've been very fortunate in their client base. Judgment isn't an inherently bad thing. It's how we know that murdering people is wrong. So when a convicted child lover client told me, nothing gets me going like a pair of little girls' worn panties, you better believe I judged the F out of him. I continued to work with him and I treated him with compassion and respect because he's a human being worthy of both. I did my job because I'm a professional, but I can't honestly say that I didn't judge him. I judged that he should never be around children. I judged that he is not yet ready for change. I judged that his access to his own daughter should be closely supervised. That's a lot of judgments. Understanding your own inherent biases and how they influence your work is a very important part of training and practice. I joined in a review of a secluded patient and he threw a cup of pee and poo in my face when we opened the door. I tried to be objective about his experience, but I just thought, what a C word. I work in inpatient services, so it can be hard to challenge myself at times. Individuals with diagnosis of personality disorder, for example, can do things that in isolation make you think they're just being bratty or manipulative. but to think of the experiences that shaped them to react like that in a given situation can help to clear my judgment and find compassion. Harder when someone bites me or hits me with one of our fabulously detachable anti-ligature curtain poles, though. I was once in my psychiatrist's office, a bi-monthly, 15 minutes med check. She asked me what was going on, more as conversation. I told her that in the last 6 weeks, my 3 elders, aunt and 2 uncles I was guardian, conservator for had died, one right after the other. My wife had a heart attack, my daughter attempted to take his life, and my mom broke her hip and had laid on her floor for a week before being found. She drank and ate from the dog's bowls. I got that call within 10 minutes of setting up the last funeral. She stopped the meeting, got on the phone with a therapist in the office next to her and had her postpone her next meeting to speak with me. I was so effed up, I had no idea. I think she saved my life.
Like, subscribe, and check out our TikTok for more content. See you next time.